Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. We've had a few weeks off now just because of a little bit of personal news. I have been on paternity leave for 2-3 weeks, Dan? So the podcast had to pause while I adjusted to family life. But we're back, and we're back with another great episode as we speak to one of the newest members of British Swimming Elite Squad, as Leah Crisp has been selected to swim at the World Championships in the 10K open water.
Yeah, I mean, as we've always said at Propulsion Swimming, we don't just focus on one aspect of swimming, but all aspects of it, including master swimming, para swimming, open water. And for this episode, we've got Leah on, who's made that transition from the pool to open water. So it's going to be great to get to know the reasoning behind that decision and what differences it's made for her.
Yes, so let's have a quick listen of what's to come on this week's show.
It was quite tough because I think it was like 9:16 to make the final or something, which is obviously not competitive in the slightest for that kind of level. So it was quite frustrating in knowing that you could have gone and been in an international final and gained the experience. Yeah, I'd say in my first couple of years here, I sat kind of like mid-50s, maybe 60s. So not crazy weeks. And then this year in November, we built up to 70s. And at first, I really struggled with that because it'd been so long since I'd done kind of like big mileage stuff. And then throughout the rest of the year, I managed to bring that up to 90s.
Are you enjoying this switch, going from your 60Ks up to 90, maybe even reach 100 by the time, let's say, Paris comes around or something? Have you enjoyed it?
I have, in the way I can see the results each week.
Okay.
I can see a real improvement in, say, like the speed I'm able to hold with like an aerobic heart rate and things. So I think I'm enjoying the sense I feel like I gain a lot from it.
So Dan, like I said in the brief introduction, we've had a few weeks off now, and for those who are interested in the outro of this podcast, we will touch upon a little bit about why we've been quiet. Because there have been stuff going on behind the scenes as well, not necessarily in the podcast sphere. But on this week's show, we are welcoming Leah Crisp. So I'm going to just jump straight into this episode and let her introduce herself to you all. So please welcome onto this week's podcast, Bath Performance Centre swimmer, Leah Crisp. So welcome onto this week's podcast, Leah Crisp. Now, Leah, for some of our listeners, you may not be a household name yet within the British Swimming Squad. So why don't you introduce yourself to everyone who's listening?
Yeah, I'm currently swimming at Bath National Centre, or Bath Performance Centre. I've just qualified this year for my first World Championships in the 10K marathon swimming. Just made the transition from pool into open water. Previously at junior level, I've been to a couple of European juniors and got a few medals at Commonwealth Youth Games in the pool. And then, yes, I've just transitioned now over to senior and in open water.
Yes, so the whole point of this podcast is we're going to go through essentially the transition from pool to open water, why it's happened, and maybe touch upon, is the pool still there in your future? It might well be. But let's first start off with your journey through swimming. Where did it all start for you, and how did you get to the Bath Performance Centre? I'm glad we're not the only ones who slip up on the rebranding.
Yeah. Well, it kind of all started when I was, young, just doing lessons, and then the teacher kind of picked out to my parents, oh, she's quite talented, maybe try out for kind of a local group. And they had little feeders near where I was in Wakefield that kind of fed into City of Leeds Swim Club. So I joined one of those and then kind of got scouted from there and joined the club when I was about 8 years old. Then kind of moved up through the Leeds system into the top squad and swam there until I was 18, until COVID lockdown. So there for a lot of years. Went to a couple of European juniors and stuff. And then from there I chose to come to Bath Performance Centre. I also wanted to go to Bath Uni to further my studies, which is kind of one of the main factors that led to me moving here. I kind of obviously knew they had a great setup and it'd be great to be part of the Performance Centre, and then the education kind of nicely tied into that. And it's a lovely city, so that's kind of why I chose to move down here, and that's where I've been since the end of COVID.
Do you know, the City of Leeds Swimming Club is a mighty fine swimming club, and amazingly, we've never really touched upon it on this podcast in 160 odd episodes now. So tell us a little bit more about the setup that goes on over in Leeds, because there's a lot of good swimmers that come out of there.
Yeah, it is. It's a great setup. It's kind of, normal club setup with a lot of different kind of levels. I think it's changed a little bit since I was there, because it used to be kind of C group, E group, D groups. But I think it's now like stage 8 and things like that. So they've got a nice system there. You kind of just move up through the squads. And it's a great team atmosphere. Like every time you go to nationals, you travel as a team and you stay as a team, which I think is a bit different to other clubs. But that's what I really liked about it. So you kind of built a real good team atmosphere with your coaches and teammates. So from when I was 11 till I was 18, every single nationals, summer, winter, British champs, I travelled with the team, stayed with the team, and had, it was really good time, great memories, and really enjoyed it there.
Would you say it's been plain sailing all the way through your career to this point?
No, definitely not plain sailing. I'd say my junior career was pretty plain sailing. I had a minor knee injury, but I kind of sorted that over a summer, and then was fine once it got to kind of October time. So I've never had anything too difficult to deal with until after lockdown. I did find it hard kind of moving programs like before and after lockdown, because obviously it's kind of like you were coming out of, the most time you've ever had off swimming and into a completely new environment, and that took quite a while for me to get settled into. And then at the end of my first year at Bath, I quite badly broke and dislocated my elbow in May. So that was then like my first proper injury that actually really affected my swimming. So that took quite a while to fully come back from. Like even now, I can't fully extend my elbow compared to my other one, and it's still like a little bit weak in extension. And there's not kind of anything I can really do about it. So that was kind of one of the main factors. But I feel like I've really settled into it now and kind of where I want to be.
How did you break your elbow there?
Well, I was trying to reach a pull-up bar because I'm not that vertically gifted, and I fell backwards and then landed on my arm, locked out. Yeah, not great.
That sounds horrible.
No,
And you're still having issues with it now, like, to the point where you can't fully extend. So has it affected your technique in some sort of way?
Not particularly, no. I've got quite lucky and it healed really well. It's just I have quite a lot of hyperextension. So I now just have normal extension instead of hyperextension in one elbow. But to me, because I'm so used to hyperextension, it feels a little bit weird. Yeah.
So, actually, coming out of the COVID years, we spoke to a lot of swimmers who were doing the same sort of transition period of going from club setup to, okay, now's the time we've got to jump to a senior setup. I think it was like, if I think back to Mehdi Harris, and a lot of these swimmers we spoke to were on the sprinting side of things, whereas you're very much on the distance side. So why was that? So for those guys, it was, they found the COVID years fairly comfortable because they didn't need the massive training blocks and meters behind them. How hard was it for someone who targets the 8, the 15, and now the 10K to almost see your times progress? Was it a fair few years of struggle?
Yeah, I've only actually this season done my first PBs. My last, since 2019, I hadn't improved until end of 22 and start of 23. So it took quite a lot of years to kind of really get back to even being on my best times. So yeah, I think obviously part of it was with injuring my elbow. I didn't kind of mentally give myself enough credit for that. I kind of was really harsh on myself that I wasn't PBing, and I was kind of forgetting I'd gone through like a really bad injury. But it's just because it fell kind of over summer, I almost just classed it as like a long summer break, when obviously it wasn't. Like, it's very, very different kind of going through rehab than just having a summer break. So it has taken me a bit longer. And also in the Commonwealth Games year, I tried to put my focus a bit more on kind of like the 400 and 800, as they were kind of, best chance of making Commonwealth Games. But I don't think in doing so that kind of really worked for me, the style of training we were doing to focus for that. But now that I'm focusing more on the 10, we've found something that really works for me, and it's brought me on a lot really quickly.
I mean, you had a lot of success in Nepal, especially since your time at Bath, of course, and winning multiple British Championships. Were you happy with your progress in Nepal? You've just said that you didn't PB for a while, but overall, were you quite content with how you were doing?
I wasn't for a couple of years. I think I really just wanted to kind of get a PB, and it was a bit frustrating when, you're kind of doing all the work, you're not really seeing the results yet.
Yeah.
Because I was obviously still happy with like where I was placing and kind of the medals I was getting, but I think it's a bit frustrating still that I just wasn't kind of doing the times I wanted to, especially when I missed the Commonwealth squad. Because I knew that was very much within reach for me. So then to kind of not perform as I wanted and missed out on that was really frustrating.
Yeah, I think looking back, me and Dan reviewed the Commonwealth Games, and it felt like a missed opportunity to take distant swimmers on the part of the home nations, because I think especially the women's 800, you saw that it was just Australians in the water, and there wasn't any representation. So was that tough for you to miss out on it felt like an open door, a chance for swimmers like yourself to get that sort of level of experience?
It was quite tough because I think it was like 9:16 to make the final or something, which is obviously not competitive in the slightest for that kind of level. So it was quite frustrating in knowing that you could have gone and been in an international final and gained the experience. But at the same time, like, I knew I didn't hit the qualification time that was set, which was very much within reach. I just didn't move it on enough to make it. So it was frustrating, but kind of knowing it was within reach. But yeah.
Would you say that was probably the reason for the transition to open water, because that was classed as, let's say, a disappointment, and then you felt as though you had to have a change, almost like a change in discipline completely?
It was definitely one of the reasons, yeah. But I had done open water before when I was younger. I'd been to World Juniors and European Juniors back when I was kind of like 14-ish, and I kind of like dipped in and out of it a little bit. But I think after that, I kind of realised like it is probably where my strengths lie, and I kind of know from the way I train that really that discipline would be what suits me as a swimmer. So I thought, maybe it is time to kind of really get stuck in with it and see what we can do.
When you say that's where your strengths lie, what are those strengths that are suited more to open water than pool swimming?
I'd say mainly just endurance. Like, I find I just don't really, I can just kind of just keep swimming, really. I don't have a lot of speed. I know that, and so we were kind of trying to improve my speed to improve my pool swimming, but it just wasn't, no matter how much work we did on it, I didn't really get any faster. It's kind of like, right, I obviously don't particularly have the speed to be a 400 and 800 swimmer, but I have the kind of makeup to be able to do a 10k and enough speed to still do well in 10k.
I was going to say, like the 10k open water, pretty much you're staying with the entire pack for until the last, 200 meters, and then it just becomes a massive squabble until the end. And so I imagine there's still a little bit of sprint training that needs to go into it, but I imagine most of it is all endurance. So is the meterage now gone through the roof compared to what you used to be able to do?
Yeah, I'd say in my first couple of years here, I sat kind of like mid-50s, maybe 60s. So not crazy weeks. And then this year in November, we built up to 70s. And at first I really struggled with that because it'd been so long since I'd done kind of like big mileage stuff. And then throughout the rest of the year, I managed to bring that up to 90s. And now I'm now able to do that a lot better than I was able to do 70 in November. So it's been nice to see the progress as I've kind of gotten used to it and now able to train at those volumes.
90k a week that's tough. Yeah. That's really tough. What is it? What's the makeup of that 90k week then? Because it's not just, or is it just ploughing up and down and getting the meters in? Is there some structure to the sessions?
There is a lot of aerobic, like A2 swimming. But we also I have a few sessions that kind of like descend to threshold to kind of touch at that pace. So like tonight I had a 9k session, but we had some 50s with speed bursts in there just to kind of keep in touch with that gear change. Sometimes I do an 11k session where like 10k was made up as almost like a simulation race. So we did one of those where The main set was 9.4k. I think it was 1600s. So we did like a spin the wheel thing. So I wouldn't know what it was as until we kind of did that. So, so it's kind of like adapting to changing scenarios. So it'd be things like when Jamie blows the whistle, I'd have to do 50 max for a 60 and the rest of it aerobic. So that's kind of how we would mix it up. Like, you can't do a lot of intensity because it depletes you too much to do the mileage. But we make sure to throw in some threshold, a bit of speed and things like that, to keep in touch with it.
It sounds like you're just it sounds like it's more to keep you mentally switched on, like you're not losing focus as well.
Well, there was definitely part of open water is being aware of what's going on around you. So that's why we kind of like to throw those things. So when you're under fatigue, that you're still recognizing what's happening and still able to make quick decisions and quick gear changes under that like physical stress and pressure.
Have you had to do more? Rehab's not quite the right word, but more resistance bands for the shoulders, because I assume there's a lot more pressure going through the shoulders because the amount of times you're doing strokes per session. So have you had to do more of that?
Well, we changed my gym program, so we kind of stripped down the gym to now I'm just on one session a week, and it's mainly focused on shoulder maintenance. So that's the kind of work we do, and then we do have pre-pool where I focus on a lot of mobility and things like that. So it's just really just keeping an eye on it and keeping in check. But so far, the shoulders have coped fine.
Oh, easy. If I'm thinking off the top of my head now, so the main kind of, in my eyes, the main distance squad in this country is at the Loughborough University setup, where you've got Hector, Toby Robinson, you've got all the Whiffin brothers as well, Felix. They do big meters. Now over in Bath, I'm struggling to think off the top of my head who are your training partners when you're going through the 9-10k sessions. So are you doing it alone, or is there people there with you?
I don't really have people for like the 9s, but I often have Luke Turley for some of the like kind of 8Ks. Or like this morning, him and Kieran Bird were in with me for 8K of the session, and I did the last K by myself. So sometimes I have those guys, they kind of drop in and out a little bit, which is nice when they do. And this cycle, we're trying to keep like one session a week where I like a higher intensity session where I train with the whole group, so I can get a bit of like head-to-head work in, so it's not just me by myself all the time.
Yeah, because I can imagine that could get quite lonely, just in the corner plodding up and down a lane.
Well, yeah. What's your mentality like when, let's say, Luke and Kieran come in and then they leave and you've still got another K to go? What in your mind, how are you processing that?
I find that's not too bad, because I'm like, well, I've already done 8 and there's only one left. So it's like you're kind of so close to the end that you can kind of get yourself through it in the way that you're like, done most of the work, just got a little bit left, then we're done.
Is there any plans for like swimmers like, I know Amber Keegan's also selected this summer, is there any plans to join up your training together a little bit or have training partners in the future?
Not currently. I mean, obviously I'm kind of restricted with studies. I know Amber is with PhD as well, so then you're kind of a little bit restricted in times that you can be away from where you're based, really. So not currently, but there may be room to put things like that in place.
Are you enjoying this switch, going from your 60Ks up to 90, maybe even reach 100 by the time, let's say, Paris comes around or something? Have you enjoyed it?
I have, in the way I can see the results each week.
Okay.
I can see a real improvement in, say, like the speed I'm able to hold with like an aerobic heart rate and things. So I think I'm enjoying the sense I feel like I gain a lot from it.
Okay.
And also, like, now I've got Worlds, I've got something to work for. So that kind of, you quite enjoy it in the way that you can kind of see something there that you really want to excel at.
Yeah, if we talk about your progress then, all you have to do is look at how the open water circuit has started so far for you this year with, I think it's just your second attempt at the World Cup. You came, 13th in I can never pronounce this right. It's Sabuto.
I think it's Setubal.
Setubal. I can never pronounce that. Well, you placed 13th in Setúbal in Portugal, which is actually a very historic venue and a tough swim as well, looking at the conditions.
Yeah.
Did that result surprise you at all?
I kind of knew I had it in me from like the training and work I'd done. I just knew I needed to kind of get a bit more practice and refine tactics a bit, and was about learning. I was quite surprised because it was so wavy, and I kind of thought, oh, I'm still quite new to open water. I've never experienced this kind of race before. So I kind of was a bit like, especially kind of around the halfway mark, I was a bit like, oh, I kind of, I just want to finish this now for the experience. I'm not sure if I can, what placing I can get out of this race. But I just managed to really kick on in the last 2 laps and sit with the pace of the other girls. I'd say I was really happy with that race in that I was only 5 seconds off top 10. So I kind of managed to really kind of stick with those lead girls. And I'd gone from, say, in Sardinia, I think I was like 2 minutes or more behind the winner. And there I was only 39 seconds. And obviously there's only like a week between them. It's not like I'd done loads of training and gained a lot. I just had learnt more about the sport. So I think that I thought that was really positive in how just from one week to another, by just experiencing what it's like to open water, you can make big progress.
Yeah, I mean, we've previously spoken to both Hector and Toby, who, like you, were and still are top pool swimmers. Do you reckon that actually helps, having that background in a pool heading into open water?
Yeah, we've looked at some of the stats, and like my 200 and 400 especially are right up there with the girls in the top 10. I do have work to do in my 8 and 15, so I still want to kind of stay in touch with that. But I think naturally through the increased training I'm doing now, hoping that those events will kind of move themselves on. If I just kind of drop in and race them every now and again, it's definitely important to kind of keep in touch with that pool speed and pool swimming, especially for confidence as well. If you can kind of go in knowing you're one of the top girls in an 8 or 1500, you really know that you can stick with them then.
How much are you getting from Hector and Toby in terms of advice for tactics? Because they have been on the open water circuit for a little while now.
Yeah, quite a lot. They're really easy to talk to, and in quite a few of my races, I just went and just asked advice. Like Hector, in Setúbal, I was like, oh, what would you recommend for swimming when it's really wavy and choppy like that? He kind of said, you might want to drop the legs a bit because they can disrupt rhythm and things. And they're just really useful for little bits of advice like that for things you've not experienced before. So it's nice to have the kind of senior athletes on the teams with you that have experienced a lot and can help you there.
Have you sought advice from the swimmers that have already done it before you, your Cassie Passons or your Carrie-Anne Paynes, the ones who've actually gone on to win Olympic medals in open water? Have you reached out to them or them to you?
Not yet, but that's something me and Jamie have kind of briefly spoken about, a possibility moving forwards, is kind of seeing if you get like a kind of mentor kind of relationship with them and get some advice and help.
So you've qualified for the World Champs this summer. What is the goal when you go to Japan? What's the aim for you?
Aim, I guess, is just to finish as high as possible and to just kind of, stick with the leaders and see what we can do. I know definitely there's now the selection policy out to qualify for Doha World Champs, which is the selection race for Paris. So obviously in Japan, I'd like to be looking to qualify for Doha there as well, so I can kind of get that ticked off and done and kind of put all my focus there.
What was your immediate reaction to receiving the news that you actually qualified for World Champs?
Yeah, I was really happy, really grateful. Just really looking forward to it. I think it's such a great opportunity. I've always wanted to travel to Japan as well, so really excited for that. Honestly, I was just really, really happy. Like a lot of years of work, it feels like I've had a lot of years of work go into this. So yeah, I was really happy with that. Can
I touch upon you having to qualify in Doha to go to Paris? Because we've spoken about it on this podcast that when you look at it at training cycles, the Doha World Champs sits in possibly like the worst place imaginable for British swimmers, because you're gonna have to slightly taper to go to that world champs and swim well to qualify, and then you've got to get back up again for trials. So how does it work for you in terms of open water? Are you solely focusing on Doha as being your shot to Paris and then kind of writing off champs, or do you think you can fit in training cycles around the pool qualifying as well?
I think definitely focus would be in Doha and qualifying the open water. The times for the 8 and 15, the pool that will probably come out, that will be set, will probably be a little bit out of reach for me over the next couple of years. So really open water is kind of my big opportunity. So just want to kind of embrace that and put all my focus in there.
How far do you reckon you could go in open water? Seeing as you've just said that you've gone from, let's say, 2 minutes off the top 10, I think you said, no, or that now you're down to like 39 seconds off. The progression seems to be quite good. So how far do you think you can go?
Well, obviously I'd love to qualify for Paris. And then hopefully start kind of finishing top 10 and medaling at kind of World Cups and kind of building up from there. That's the ideal aim. Obviously just kind of, when I finish uni next year, it will also kind of depend financially if I continue swimming or not. So just kind of have to go from there and see. But, ideally, the main goal is to really start medaling on the world stage and to really become one of the main open water swimmers.
So you've clearly got this buzz for open water swimming, but if there are any young swimmers, particularly maybe distance swimmers, who are looking to up their meterage and try a distance like 10K, what sort of advice would you give to them as to why you love it so much? Why is it so good?
Well, I'd say first, maybe don't jump straight in with the 10. There's other races out there, kind of like 5 and 7.5. You kind of, can go and get a feel for it and see if that's really what you want to do. I really enjoy kind of being outdoors. I find it's just, you get to travel some amazing places, and, you get to swim in some amazing places as well. And it is really enjoyable, and it's just a really nice feeling, kind of, just swimming out in the seas, but it's nice and crystal clear. You can see all the fish and things. Like, it's really lovely experience, and it's also a really nice team atmosphere that we have because it's quite a small team. So yeah, I'd say if you're interested, kind of find some, like, there's the Great North Swim and things like that you can try, and just kind of get involved and see what you think and give it a go.
I bet it's amazing when it's weather like this at the moment, 30 degrees outside. Amazing, lovely.
Yeah, there's a nice place near me. I went for the first time last week to start building in some open water training into my weekly program. But yeah, it's lovely when the sun's out and you're kind of just having a nice little swim session.
There's not enough opportunities in this country to swim outdoors.
No, it's a shame.
Yeah, I know that's the only issue with the UK is it is quite a short open water season that we have. So you kind of have to take these opportunities where you can, really.
Yeah,
Would you ever consider going to, because Hexa went off to France, would that be something in your sort of pipeline of thinking as well?
Not particularly. I'm quite happy where I am at the moment.
The meters and training sessions that Hector was doing over in France sounds horrible. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. It was horrendous. Leah, it's been great chatting to you on this week's podcast. We do usually finish with some quick fire questions so that our listeners can get to know our guests a little bit better. So to kick things off, what is your favourite event in swimming?
I'd say to swim 400 free and to watch 200 free.
Who is your swimming idol?
I'd probably say Katie Ledecky.
Nice. What's your proudest moment in swimming so far?
So far, making world champs this year.
What's the hardest set you've ever done in training?
Oh, that is a tough one. Got to say the 1600s were up there, or even 1500s descent to kind of best average. That was pretty tough.
Yeah, that's not easy. That's a pretty horrible one.
And final question, it gets to know you a little bit away from the swimming pool. If you'd go on a road trip, there's 3 spaces in the car. You can take friends, family, celebrity, anyone you want. who would you take with you?
Oh, that is a really tough one. Probably say my 1-year-old nephew, because I've not spent much time with him yet, so he can definitely be in the car. My boyfriend and that's tough. Because I want to take both parents. Maybe my brother to look after my nephew, but spend a bit of time with him.
So you don't have to do the parenting bit.
Yeah.
When he starts crying.
Family car.
Exactly.
Family car, I like it. Well, Leah, best of luck this summer out in Japan, and thank you for giving up some time this evening to speak to us. And yeah, I love open water, and everyone should hopefully give it a go as well. Whether you're a sprinter, a distance swimmer, just get out in the lake this summer. Be safe, but enjoy what is it's a different aspect of the sport of swimming, but one of the most enjoyable aspects I've found.
Yeah, it is really enjoyable and quite relaxing as well, especially like when the sun's out. It's a really nice atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for coming on and telling us your story. And the transition has been fascinating, and hopefully there'll be more people doing that transition, because I think you've sold it quite well, to be fair. So yes, and good luck in Japan as well, of course.
Thank you.
So Dan, great to speak to the newest member of British Swimming. Obviously, the whole World Championships team in the pool was selected a long time ago, but 3 open water swimmers have now been added to the squad in Japan in Hector Pardo, Amber Keegan, and Leah Crisp. Now, we've spoken to both Amber and Hector before. They've got fascinating journeys in the pool and out of the pool. And Leah is certainly one to keep an eye on this summer, as she's really only just touching the surface of what's possible in open water for her. You get that feeling with the transition that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke a lot about the transition, and actually we didn't talk too much about her results at the Open Water World Series, where she has done 2 attempts now. If I remember correctly, she came 20th on her first attempt in Sardinia. I think it's something like that. And then she came 13th in Portugal, with a place I now can't pronounce again because we had troubles with that during the podcast as well. But yeah, I mean, the progressions she's made has been outstanding, to be honest with you. And I do wonder, you take a look at Hector, you take a look at Toby, and they've all got background from the pool swimming. Take a look at Paltrineri and Wellbrook and people like that, and they're very good at the pool swimming, the 1500, and they're now able to transition that to 10k open water, and they are the top of the world. So it does make you think if more people will sooner or later take that jump.
It was something that Leah was saying in that podcast, is to be a good open water swimmer these days is you have to be world class in the pool as well. So she looks and she says, look, I've got 4 and a 200 meters freestyle, which rivals a lot of these girls in the open water. My 8 and the 15 still need work. So it's not like she's completely abandoning the work in the pool to do open water swimming. But from speaking to her for a half hour, it very much sounds like open water is the future for her. And for me, when you look at, and this is no knock on what British Swimming do, the selection criteria to go for a Worlds, for maybe even a Europeans, for Olympics next year, to go as an 8 or a 1500 meters freestyle swimmer, especially as a woman, is ridiculously hard, because they are based off the fastest swimmer in the world, Katie Ledecky. That is the selection times that these women have got to hit. So for Leah to transition and say, look, open water is my best opportunity, I fully understand that, and I'd expect more swimmers to be doing that in the future, actually, as long as Katie Ledecky's swimming like Katie Ledecky.
Well, I mean, I just don't see that world record going anytime soon from Katie's 18 or 15, and so the times are always going to be tough to qualify for
Really tough.
every international meet for the foreseeable future.
Unless selection criteria changes for British Swimming and they say, look, our girls are good enough now to final, let's just take them regardless of what time. But
Well, maybe
that's not the logic, is it?
Maybe Leah's going to be a great example where, yes, she's multiple British champion, but she'd missed out on, let's say, the Commonwealth qualification time. But now she's right in the mix. She's right in the mix of being pretty close to being the top 10 swimmer in open water. So it's interesting.
Essentially, that's if she comes top 10 open water in Paris, that's a final at the Olympics.
What it is. Yeah. I asked her a question from the Commonwealth Games, because she didn't get selected. I know she missed a qualifying time, but because the standard was so low, I think, on that Commonwealth final for the 8 and the 15, the fact that she wasn't selected and then missed out on that experience of going on to that international sort of level, that was one of the reasons why she moved across, as well as she's better at the endurance side of things as well. But it's quite interesting that, weirdly, in a weird sort of way, British swimming actually kind of forced her into the open water scene because they didn't give her the chance in a pool, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, Commonwealth Games to start with was Swim England, so I'd just correct you on that one.
Thank you very much. Yep.
At the same time, the Commonwealth, that was my biggest bugbear with the Commonwealth Games last year. The distance events, there were a chance to take 2 English, 2 Brits, 2 Welsh, whoever, and give them this experience, because I don't even know if the final was filled. I think I remember back, and it was just 3 Aussies, and that was that. Like, what the hell was the point in that? You're at Birmingham, just swim someone. Like, Leah could have finished 4th in an international final. That's very good.
Add that to a CV, and then suddenly it looks pretty good, doesn't it? You know.
But like you say, I understand the transition to open water, and I think there's only better things to come as she learns the tactics, learns to deal with swimming through waves, because that's a different experience altogether than up and down the bath pool.
We've got a bit of a rich history in the open water scene as well. We were saying Cassie Patton, Hector, of course, Toby, Kerry-Ann Payne. So we've got David Davis. We've got good people that have actually gone on to win Olympic medals, and who knows, Leah could be one of those people to join that list as well. So all the best to her. I think she's going to do quite well, and obviously results have proved me right so far. So it's
100%, and best of luck to her, Hector and Amber this summer over in Japan. We'll certainly be paying close attention to those results in the sea. So, Dan, before we end this week's podcast, it's kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of people, especially if you've got to this point in a propulsion swimming podcast, you're 37, 38, 39 minutes into me and Dan talking. You kind of, you're invested in what's going on at propulsion swimming, I would guess. Please comment below if you're not. So let's have a little bit of catch up of what's gone on over the past month and what's to come up in the past month, because we haven't really talked about it much on this podcast. So to kick things off, before British Champs, we announced that we have signed a partnership with Speedo to essentially cover 6 British swimming events in this country and more. To help promote British swimming that little bit better. And it's a partnership that I'm very, very proud of, and something that, after British Champs, has worked extremely well for both us and Speedo. And we haven't spoken about it on this podcast, but it's a big deal. Like, being able to get to these meets, which is something that we have always dreamt and wanted to do, and give the coverage that we feel that British swimming deserves and needs, is a massive moment for us as a channel, as a podcast, as a brand, and long may it continue, because I feel like it's just the start of what we feel is possible with our cameras.
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of doing it is to promote the sport in this country, and I feel like we are, again, just scratching the surface. The idea is to promote the sport, inspire others on, your social medias. Everyone always scrolls on your Instagrams or your Facebooks, whatever else. And
so
the idea is to try and make swimming enjoyable to watch. And so the idea is to be on poolside, whether we're up in a crowd or, pool deck, and actually try and film some of the best swimmers we have in this country, to then get the younger swimmers watching them and be inspired, and hopefully they then dream to be the next Adam Peaty, Tom Dean, Abby Wood, all those sort of swimmers, And so that's what we're trying to do, and the help of Speedo has helped greatly with that. I believe we've done 2 events so far this year. We've got another 4 to go, and we are loving it at the moment. And I can kind of see, based on the comments that we have underneath, that a lot of you guys are loving it as well. And so thank you very much for being part of this journey. And we will hopefully, like we said, we're scraping the surface, and hopefully we can keep going and get the sports, have new eyes on it all the time.
No, I'm really grateful that Speedo have taken this massive leap with us, and so far the eyes and the numbers that we are seeing behind the scenes, and the interest in the content that is coming out of propulsion swimming is nuts. It's unbelievable, and to a level that I couldn't even imagine. Let's be honest.
No,
I didn't. Like, it's ridiculous. But that is not the only news over the past few months. We have also launched the Propulsion Swimming store. So we have very briefly mentioned it on this podcast. I think we did it just after Champs, if I remember correctly.
It was just after Champs, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So the whole point of this store is not for us to rake in a profit and essentially make loads of money off you guys. What we want to do is for you to be able to show your support for Propulsion Swimming and all of the profits that we get from any items of clothing. We've got swim hats on there. We've got hoodies, t-shirts, poolside gear. Essentially is then going to be able to send us to meets which we aren't sponsored to go to, because it does cost a lot of money to travel around the UK and give up our weekends filming. And that is what that store is aimed to go towards. And also the quality of the stuff is not poor. It's taken us 2 years to decide on half of this stuff.
It has, yeah. And actually, that's pretty much all we wear now, isn't it? Just the stuff on the store, that's pretty much all we wear. That's now my wardrobe. I'm quite happy with the store as well, because one of the things that we do sell on there are the flags. And again, it comes under the same banner of trying to promote the sport, whereas we're not just filming the swimmers in the pool, but it's actually the people in the crowd as well. So if we can get more flags on poolside to help promote and support all the swimmers in the clubs, then it all helps.
Now, for our loyal podcast listeners, there is a discount code in the YouTube description of this podcast. So head over and have a look at that if you want some money off all the merchandise that we've got on sale. Yep. And the last bit of news that has happened, if you may have caught it in the background then, is I've become a dad, which is a weird thing to say on a podcast, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who are listening who have joined us for like 3 years at this point. They probably know that both me and Dan have got married in that time, and that is why we've had the longest time off this podcast since I cannot remember. When have we ever had 3 weeks off?
Well, we haven't. Well, I don't think we have. We haven't had 3 weeks off. But I feel like it's a good reason, because I imagine you're quite sleep deprived, although you say he's actually sleeping quite well.
Oh, do you know what? He's a dream. He's an absolute dream right now, which is really good. He's settled into life at home really well. Luckily, swimming has prepared me for functioning on not too much sleep, so I'm all good.
I imagine there's some people listening thinking, oh, you lucky so-and-so, like getting 3 or 4 hours.
Long may it continue.
Yeah.
So Dan, what's going to be coming up over the next few weeks then for Propulsion Swimming? Because the world of swimming is just about to go crazy.
Yeah, well, it always does in the summer, doesn't it? We've had our British trials already for the World Championships, so we know who's going from a British point of view. As this episode goes live, we are already during Aussie trials, so we will find out who's going to be representing Australia at the Japan World Championships as well. And then in 2 weeks' time, it's the US trials as well. So we will review that as well, both of those meets. And then, of course, the actual World Championships themselves, which is going to be a bit of a showdown based on how well some of these swimmers are swimming right now across the planet.
Absolutely. I'm expecting world records to fall absolutely everywhere. And then, of course, we're going to be poolside at British Summer Champs, at English Summer Champs, as part of our partnership with Speedo, covering those meets and bringing the age group feel to our Instagram feed and to social media, YouTube. I'm really excited for what's to come. So, Dan, that just about rounds up this week's episode of the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. We're going to be back next week with another episode. And yeah, over the next few weeks, there are some big guests, hopefully, we've got lined up, and some big podcasts on the way. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do so on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And me and Dan will see you in 7 days' time.
Yeah, thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You've been listening to the Propulsion Swimming Podcast with Scott and Dan. We want to thank you for joining us and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as checking out the Propulsion Swimming YouTube channel for weekly tutorials and videos to get your swimming fix. We will be back next week. Until then, we'll catch you on the next one.